So the title of today's message is the modern day system of slavery. So we're going to look all the way back to the beginning when slavery started, and then we're going to look at where we are today, if you guys don't mind going there with me. All right, last time we talked briefly about the Freedmen's Bureau, and we were talking about the miseducation of financial literacy in the black community. So we're not going to stray away from that tonight, because it is very important that as a black community that we gain the economic power that we were supposed to have after slavery. But before we do that, I want us to really think about the enemy's plot. The enemy's plan is to change out our original precept, the original thought that Elohim already had given us. So what we're looking at today is how can we break free from that and move forward with the kingdom concepts. All right, we got our message up. All right, so we are at Empowerment and Faith. We learned about the 6 stages of conformity. The 6 stages of conformity has transformed my mind in the way that I think, and the way I look at why the way I think, or what I like. Why do I like that? So before we get into the message, we have to look at that concept, the original precept, the design of the master, which is the king, Elohim, how he designed us and what we were purposed to do. Then we can go through slavery and run it through the kingdom concepts, and then we can find the root of it, and maybe we can move forward. So that precept is the original thought that comes from an idea. So the original precept is the original thought from the king, from the father, the original intent, the purpose of it. And so from that, we get our concepts, and then we get our convictions from our concepts, and then we form what we see as a belief system, number 4. What the enemy is trying to do is he's trying to, and Dr. Larry has said this before, he's trying to change our original precept. So in order for someone to get a new precept, a new way of thinking, they have to have another exchange or another thought or another original purpose. All right, so from that you get your ideology. And what we want to really look at is our philosophy, the lifestyle that we live. All right. All right, so we're going to go back all the way to the kingdom first to see how Elohim designed man and what he designed man for. So the original purpose or the precept for the creation of man, we're going to look at that in Genesis 1 and Bereshit 1 and 25 through 28, and we have that up here for you. So I want to ask a question. What was Elohim's purpose for the design of man? So this is something we have to look at when we're dealing with slavery and moving forward as a community now. And then, did Elohim give man the authority to dominate over another person? See, that's where slavery comes in, and this is why it was so devilish, so evil, filled with darkness, because it wasn't of the Father. So if it wasn't from light, it's from darkness. So we're going to look at Bereshit 25. We're going to skip that one and go to the next one. And Elohim said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish, over the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So from that, we can take that right there and build on what we're getting ready to build on tonight, which is Elohim did not give us dominion over another person. So slavery has to be of the enemy, and right now we're looking at it's still systematic racism amongst us now that we have to break. So we're looking at the original purpose of man, and it wasn't for us to dominate over other men, so we can cut that out now. So slavery was a result of man attempting to dominate a particular group of people. All right, so when we look at all the issues in America, every issue that we see, you can trace it back to money. It's always an economic problem. Everything that goes on in the United States is an economic problem. And it's because of greed. And so the kingdom teaches us about greed. It teaches us not to love money. It teaches us that it's the root of all evil. And we're going to look at a few more things about greed. And Luke 12 and 15 and 1 Corinthians 6 and 10. And it teaches us that it's not up. I don't have it up right now, but it talks about greed, and we'll go there in a second. So we're talking about modern day system of slavery. So before we go into where we at now and the systems that are in place, we have to look at the real purpose of slavery. This is the wrong format, but I'll work with it. So the real purpose of slavery, it was all economic issue. We just talked about that. Everything they do, every issue that we've had, it's all about greed and money and deceit and lies and trying to change someone else's belief system. And so we're going to look at that. And so billions of dollars of land was given away, and most are still receiving the benefits of it. Okay, so in the Constitution, they had to rewrite it because it said that when a person came over that they were entitled to the pursuit of happiness, but it really said property. So what we're looking at, they didn't come here for the pursuit of happiness. They came here for the land and free labor. That's why they came here. That's why they came here. And people are still benefiting. That's why I have to talk, because I'm in a unit, in a military unit, and it's dominated with white people. And so we have to talk about these things constantly. And I don't think they understand how slavery damaged the minds of the blacks and how it's still working today. They don't understand that. But we're going to get them some knowledge on tonight. Hopefully they're watching. So we're going to look at some of the things that the enemy tries to do, and it, again, is trying to change our belief system. And so you can see it in the root of all of this was the enemy, because, look, these are three things that the whites told the ministers to focus on. So we know another thing that controls people is religion, and we're looking at that in today's society. And so they told those teachers to teach black slaves that the slave and the master was referring to them. So they twisted the word of Elohim. And we know that if you add or take away anything from the king's word, a curse is on you. So you have to talk to the Father about that. So and he also told them to be obedient and work hard as a slave. And another one is a pie in the sky in the afterlife. So many people that we talk to, I can't wait I've been going through it here on earth, but I just can't wait till I get to my heavenly home. It's a mansion up there for me. Well, if we go back to the original the precept and the original thought on the creation of man, we know that we're supposed to make earth just like heaven. So even when we go to heaven, we're coming back to earth to fully renovate it. So you're coming back. So you need to get used to it now. So it's our mindsets, the way we think. It's contaminated. And so if you dilute something, it loses its power. So we've been diluting the word and expecting it to work. Elohim doesn't work like that. He works in order. And so we're going to also look at some of those laws that were in place. And just doing my studies, because this month for Black History, we were introduced to Dr. Claude Anderson's books and his the set of books and his agenda and what he's trying to do for the black community. And over this past month, I've learned more about history, real, true history, than I've learned any time in my life. And it's so crazy, and we have to make sure that we don't get angry about it, but we get active, that we make sure that we filter it through the kingdom and get active. Yes, sir. So we're going to look at a few laws that were in place, and I want to skip some of them down to the root of what it really is saying. But basically, slaves were considered 3/5 of a human being. And so this is what slavery did. So you can't tell us to get back in the race or pull ourselves up from our bootstraps if this is what you've done to our community, and it's still trickling down, and you're still reaping the benefits. So it's something that's going to have to change, and we're going to look at reparations, and I got a figure for you guys as well. So if you want to get to those reparations, you might have a starting place. So slaves had no head of state, no name, title, or register. How many people are trying to go back and look at their family history, and they can only trace it back so much? it's been cut off. They've been cutting off the lineage for so long to keep us away from the truth. And so they didn't have a name, they didn't have a title, registry, nor could they take by purchase a descent. They had no heirs, and therefore they could not make a will. I mean, these are things that we talk about today. They didn't have access to it. So whatever they acquired was their master's. They could not plead nor be pleaded for, but were excluded from all civil concerns whatsoever. They were not entitled to their rights and considerations of matrimony, so they couldn't even get married. And therefore had no relief in the case of adultery. They could be sold, they can be transferred, they can be pawned. They looked at us like we were, like you said, trading cards or something, like we were a piece of property, like they said. But we weren't. We're a special and extraordinary people. We're going to look at some of those things in just a second. So these are a few more laws that they put in place. And this is the thing. This is a system. And some of these things are still going on today. It's just underlined. So for us to move forward, we're going to have to break that system. We're going to have to break that system. After the system of slavery, after the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves were freed, and shortly after the Freedmen's Bureau was birthed. We learned about the Freedmen's Bureau the last time that I taught, and what the agenda for the Bureau was to do. And that agenda was to teach free black slaves financial literacy, and they did have access to land, to acres of land, to resources and things at first. But shortly after the special orders of legislation, the president was assassinated. The next president, President Andrew Johnson, he abolished those legislations that would have provided financial literacy and economic empowerment for blacks. So where are we now? We have our black men being stripped away from their families. We have things going on in our city that's diluting the actual problem, which is black people need to have their reparations for the things that they contributed to slavery. And we're going to see on tonight exactly how much they contributed to slavery and the things that they did. So when we talk about those reparations, we have to make sure that we look at what we've done over the period of time. And not only did slavery rob blacks of their rights, but it was never corrected, and blacks still to this day are moving backwards. And they were never taught financial literacy and economic empowerment, and they are still entitled reparations. So let's look at some of those reparations. Minister Derek talked about this on the last time he talked, and we see all these other ethnic backgrounds. All these people have gotten reparations. The Japanese, the Jews, the Indians, all these different variations of Indians, it looks like. And then all these Native Americans, German, Jewish, everybody. But when you get to African American, black, and black descents, we have zero. But we contributed more to what we call a supernation of the United States. Okay, let's look at some of those things that we contributed to. So the black slaves contributed to the industrialization of cotton, and rice and sugar and the inventions. And we talk about inventions, meritorious manumission. We talk about inventions where blacks they invented things because they were trying to get free. And so they exploited blacks just like they exploit them in the NBA and the NFL right now. It's just now it's more broader now, and we think there's nothing wrong with it. But the truth is, it's modern day slavery. Like you said, no one's owning those teams, so we still under slavery. And so those entertainers, for some reason, get a pass, but what we're looking at is they own the majority of the wealth, but no one is helping empower the black community as a whole. And because this law here, the meritorious manumission, it's still going on today. Like I said, it's underlined. So we have to deal with these things in order for us to move forward. So I want to get to that. Okay, that 3/5 of a person, the slaveholders were taxed on that same 3/5 of a person. They escaped taxes, and they talk about taxes all the time, but they escaped them. They're using free labor. And if we look today on here, that nearly 4 million American slaves were worth some $3.5 billion. So really, if we look at the history, the land didn't have value until you put a slave on it. Something to think about. So when we talk about reparations, we don't just want an apology. We want the resources. We want things dedicated just for black African Americans in America. We want things just designated for us. But what they're doing, they've been diluting it. They would make it a majority thing. That's where the LGBTQ plus 7285, whatever they are, they added on to that. So let's look at how much are black people owed. So we had this guy that published the newspaper, and it's a credible source. You should go and check it out. He makes the case that there are other examples of historical reparations paid many decades later after damages were incurred. He also has come up with what he says is the most economically sound estimate to date, when we see estimate, to date of what reparations could cost, between 5.9 trillion and 14.2 trillion. We would consider the 14.2 trillion as a start, as a down payment. And what we want to do with this as well, because the kingdom talks about commonwealth, and that's what we want access to. Now we can't move forward as a unit. We can't move forward as a group until we get the proper resources that's going to be designated just for us. Okay. So let's look at modern day slavery today. So black people as a whole have not progressed economically. We are actually going backwards. That's true. There is still an underlying system of racism that exists in America. And we're going to look at some of those systems. We're going to look at some of those systems. But before we go there, we're going to look at how the dollar circulates in our communities. And so we've been taught this for a while now, but we're just going to review you. 17 days in the white community, 20 days in the Jewish community, 30 days in the Asian community, 6 hours in the black community. 30 minutes. Okay, update. It's only 30 minutes in the black community. So that's telling us, like we just said, we're going backwards. So what are we going to do to change that? What are we going to do to change that? Let's look at some of the places that we spend our money. Tobacco, smoking, drinking, whiskey, wine, and beer. Gifts, going to the movies. Really, the big one is on those gifts, holidays. Yeah. So none of those say that we're spending our money in our communities. Because if we look at those, if we trace those industries back, we're going to find a white owner. So that's why we're not moving forward as a community, because we don't own anything. So let's get that back in play and let's move forward. Another thing that they have systematically designed is the racial wealth gap. So for every, I think it's $5, black own $1.06 of it. So because after slavery, things with land, assets, investments, things like that, they were passed down from generation to generation. And so in our communities, we didn't start with anything. After we were freed slaves, they just tried to just put us back in the world. Like we just didn't go through the stuff that we just went through. So where are we going to go from here? And I really want us to really think about that, change our mindsets. We need to get back to the kingdom way of doing things. We've been on the system of the world. And so the world is a devilish system. It's not of the kingdom. So if it's not of the kingdom, then it's of the enemy. And so if you want things to work, we want to use Elohim to do things that the world wants us to do, and it doesn't work like that. You can't have any other gods inside of you, along inside of you. We want to look at another system. I don't know why it's doing that. That's pretty new. Redlining. These policies resulted in 98 of the home loans going to white families from 1934 to 1962. To sum it all up, this is a huge asset, land. Scripture talks about land over and over and over again. And so for us to move forward, we have to possess these things. But just up until 1962, they were cutting us out of the land that was supposed to be for us. And also, when we were around the land, it depreciated when it was supposed to appreciate. So these are systems that were put in place. Systems as just like Jim Crow laws. These things are still going on. Systematic racism. The Supreme Court, they're passing laws to keep us in an underclass. They're trying to get rid of us. So I was listening to Dr. Claude Anderson today, and he was talking about how we don't teach our kids about a skill set. We just keep teaching them to go to school and get a traditional degree. Going to school to get a master, but have mastered nothing. That's what we're doing. But what they're trying to do is immigration is coming forth, and the Hispanics are coming in and taking all of those positions. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to eliminate us as a class. So we got to look at those systems. All right. So this is a review. And so we have to understand, in order for us to be an independent community, we have to look at some of those things that we need to set in place. These are things that we need to do now. So we need to first get the history. Well, we need to first get the kingdom concepts. We got to change our belief system, our philosophy, our lifestyles. Then we need to get hooked on to the true history. And then we need to start working our way up through the systems that are already in place. So one thing, a hospital to protect human life, farming, that's the food, produce, nutrition. We need schools, and we need those schools to teach them a skill set so that we can industrialize the land. And we need a bank to finance it all. So these are things that we're going to need, and these are things that we need to, as ambassadors, if we start learning about these things, we can start coming together and start building these things. But until we get knowledge, because knowledge puffs up, but it says in all you're getting, get understanding. Understanding is the ability to apply the knowledge that you just got. So we got some work to do. All right, and then lastly, we're living in an information overload era. So where there is too much knowledge and not enough understanding, that's the age we're in. We have so much access to the internet, to those resources, but a lot of them aren't lining up with the kingdom, first of all. And it's so much information, it just puffs up. We don't know how to apply those principles. So until we apply the principles, then we can move forward. But Proverbs 4:7, and I'm going to end with that. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And all you're getting, get understanding. In order for us to move forward, we have to get understanding of the kingdom principles, the laws, the precepts that Elohim that has predestined and designed for us to use in order for us to gain the commonwealth. Okay? So on tonight, I want every young person to really think about it, because we're the next generation up. And so if we don't keep those principles, if we don't line up with the kingdom concepts, then it's going to go back into the world system, and we're going to continue to move backwards as a whole. So with that, I'm going to end on that.